Welcome back to Chapter 1, Our History of Computing. When we left off, we were talking about Popular Electronics magazine and computer electronics enthusiasts who were going wild over this tiny little desktop kit. And two of those electronic enthusiasts were Bill Gates and Paul Allen. When this article came out on the Altair 8800, there were two friends who were technology hobbyists. While in high school, they had created a computer-like device they called the Trafo Data, and they routinely worked as programmers for free just to get the experience. And when this article came out, the two friends contacted Roberts and told him that they had the software already written that would allow Roberts to program the Altair 8800 without using machine code, because programming the Altair 8800 was a very, very tedious process. Unfortunately, this was a little bit of a lie. They didn't have the programs already written, but they had the skill and the technical knowledge to be able to do it. And they did manage to produce a rudimentary basic interpreter within 6 weeks, which they sold to Roberts under their newly formed company called Microcomputer Software, or Microsoft for short. Bill Gates actually left Harvard University, and Paul Allen left Honeywell in order to build their newfound company. There were also two other electronic enthusiasts who were watching the Altair 8800 as well. And this is Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. They had developed a computer housed in a wooden box, and they dubbed it the Apple I. Jobs was working at Atari, and Wozniak was working at Hewlett-Packard when they first introduced this thing called the Apple I. It was in a wooden box. They put it on sale on April 1st, 1976. That's April Fool's Day. On May of 76, it went on sale for $666.66. They ended up selling about 200 of them. Can you imagine if you had one of those today? And very quickly they came out with the Apple II. 1979, Killer App. A killer app is a software application that is so popular among the users that it will drive hardware sales. People will buy computers in order to be able to run this software. And the first killer app was VisiCalc, which was a homemade or a small business or home worksheet, what we would call a spreadsheet as we know it today. 1980 was the advent of floppy disks. They were getting smaller and smaller in size, from 8-inch to 5 1/4 inch, down to 3 1/2-inch disks. The 8-inch floppy could hold 79K to 500K worth of data. The 5 1/4-inch disk could hold 120K to 1.2 meg of data. And the 3 1/2-inch floppy disk could hold 1.44 meg. Almost 1.5 meg of data. And you'll see in the picture that there is a Sony Mavic camera that used these 3 1/2-inch floppy disks as a storage device. 1981, IBM releases something called a personal computer. They decide to enter the desktop industry with this PC called the Personal Computer. I bet you didn't know PC was a brand name. It used the Intel 88 chip. It was designed by open architecture. They actually called Bill Gates to see if they could get an application or an operating system for this device. And after a little bit of conversation, Gates told them that he had an operating system that they could use. But he wisely said to them, I will sell you rights to the operating system if I can also sell it under a different name. And you can bundle yours with your PC, and we'll call it PC-DOS. And I will sell mine independent of hardware, and I'll call mine MS-DOS. So I ask you, have you ever heard of PC-DOS? And have you ever heard of MS-DOS? IBM didn't think anybody would ever desire to buy an operating system apart from the software. Unfortunately, it was a huge mistake. 1982 was the first time that Time Magazine's Man of the Year was a computer or a machine. We see with 1984, Apple is releasing the Apple Macintosh. Jobs and Wozniak, seeing the relationship that Gates had with IBM, created a computer with a graphical user interface called a GUI. So the Apple Macintosh used icons like a little garbage can to represent functionality of the machine. It also had a mouse that would move a cursor around on the screen. In '84, Windows 1.0 was released. So Bill Gates was always trying to keep up with Steve Jobs. By this time, Steve Jobs had already released a graphical user interface, and Windows 1.0 was Bill Gates' effort towards a graphical user interface as well. 1985, Grolier's electronic encyclopedia is included, mainly because it was the first general interest CD product that was released to the market. In 1989, we see the advent of HTML and the World Wide Web. Tim Berners-Lee created a programming language called HTML, in which would electronically connect documents, and we're going to have a chapter on HTML. 1992, Mosaic was the browser of choice. It was the first web browser that was used to connect to this thing that we called the World Wide Web, created by Tim Berners-Lee. 1995, we see the release of Windows 95. I included this in here because Windows 95 as an standalone operating system sold more than 1 million copies in the first 4 days after its release. I bet IBM is kicking itself over its decision to allow Bill Gates to sell the operating system apart from the hardware. In '95, eBay and Amazon were founded. You think they've been around forever, but they're relatively they're relatively young companies. In 1997, DVD players were released upon the market. 1998, the iMac was introduced. And in 1999, Sean Fanning created something called Napster. It was an independent peer-to-peer file sharing service that specialized in MP3 files of music, and it had a really user-friendly interface. Unfortunately, it had about 80 million registered users at the time that it was shut down because of legal difficulties over copyright violations. In 2000, we see the first flash drives, 8 megabytes. That's a megabyte, not a gigabyte. And in 2004, spyware became a household word. And by 2005, phishing and identity theft were also household words. 2006, Blu-ray Discs were released. HD movies. I included 2011 when Steve Jobs passed. And this is a wonderful rendition of the Apple logo with Steve's silhouette in there. He was an icon in the technology community. He revolutionized computers. He revolutionized the music industry. And he also revolutionized animated movies as well. And so we have a salute to Steve Jobs. And so the last slide is the future technology advances. It's kind of funny that 2005 and even 2010, this slide should not be called the future. This slide should be called the recent past. But these are just some of the technology advances that have been released since 2005. And so I end this video with the question, where do you think technology will be in 10 years? So one of your homework assignments is going to be to answer this question. Where do you think technology will be in 10 years? And I want you to think big, and I want you to think wild, and I want you to answer this question for me. So these are the people, the places, the events, the things that have contributed to technology as we know it today.